Writing is hard work,
It is.
and new writers often make mistakes that scream amateur. There's a lot of those mistakes, but we have narrowed it down to the top 10 mistakes that new writers make and how to avoid them. Now, even seasoned writers make these mistakes at times. So stick around because that last one could make all the difference for you.
So we're going to begin our top 10 list, the mistakes that new writers make, with number 10, and that is not revising. So as a new author, a new writer, maybe it's just a new project, you get done with that rough draft and it's like, yeah, I nailed it, I got it.
So exciting.
It is. It's a time for celebration.
Yes.
But the reality is that's when the work begins, because that rough draft has to then go through a revision process, and sometimes it'll go through multiple revision processes. So anything that you read from a successful author has been revised and revised and revised. There's a lot of revision that goes into it, from the editing to sometimes the story structure or the plot or the characters. There's always a revision process, right, Ange?
That's right. And it's actually more work, I think, than even the first draft. And so you really want to embrace that revision process.
Yeah, so my first book my sci-fi series that I did, I wrote the whole thing. I was so excited, but I've rewritten it 2 more times just to make sure that it's really good. And that's what we have to do. We have to embrace that revision process so that the end product is high quality, engages the reader, and just the best that we can do.
And number 9 is head hopping. This is the concept of jumping from one character's head to another character's head within the same scene or the same chapter. So a book has a point of view. Your point of view can be one point of view for the whole book, or it can be multiple point of views. And so in each scene or chapter, choose whose point of view you are going to be writing in. Whose eyes is the reader going to experience this story through? And that is where you have to stay for that scene or chapter.
Now, see, when I started writing, I was an expert at writing from the omniscient perspective, which means that the author is telling everybody what's happening from all perspectives all the time. And that really is an old style of writing. So if you read a lot of classic literature, you're going to see that. But it doesn't work really well in modern writing. We like to have things from one person's perspective for each scene or each chapter. So I went from learning how to stop being the omniscient writer to then hopping heads too much. And that's a mistake as well.
Yes, the omniscient point of view is great for classical literature, and I absolutely love classic literature, and I did the same thing. I thought, I'm just going to say everything, and that's really not popular. So choose one point of view for each scene or chapter and stay in their head. Don't head hop.
So one of the things that's helped me a lot with this is on my outline where I'm breaking up scenes or chapters, I write down whose perspective I'm writing from. And that is just a cue to help me remember to stay in this person's perspective and don't hop heads and get a different perspective. And it's also helpful in the revision process. So when we go back and we're rewriting, we're doing some detailed work there, that we don't make a mistake and switch perspectives.
Which is super easy to do.
It is super easy to do. Or we can find those mistakes where we have and correct those. So just a little pro tip there. Make sure to write down in each scene whose perspective it's from. So number 8 on our list is either doing too much research or not doing enough research. There is a balance when it comes to doing research for your writing project. Now, this applies to both fiction and nonfiction. So in the nonfiction world, it's really easy to do too much research and get stuck doing research and not write. or else get so many facts that all you're doing is regurgitating facts on a piece of paper, and then you're missing the story element, which makes even nonfiction interesting. So there is a balance there that we have to do. Do the research when you need to, because you can't, especially with nonfiction, you can't write about something that you don't know anything about. So you have to have enough research, enough background in it that you can make sense and people understand you're an authority on this. But don't just do so much that you're regurgitating facts. Now, fiction is the same. You can do too much research for your fiction project, or you can do not enough. And if you do not enough, you can ruin the story just like getting too much, correct?
Yes. In fact, I was reading this one book, and this has been years ago, and I still remember this book because the book was set in the same place that we currently live. And so I know the distance between destination A and destination B. I know how long it takes to travel in a car to those two places. And in the book, the author of this book did not do their basic research of travel time between cities. Very basic. What it did is it ruined the story for me. And I've never forgotten the fact that that author didn't do basic research.
Right.
I mean, research can be like a vortex that sucks you in, and you never get free to actually start writing. We don't want that. But please do your basic research, and so that you know what you're basically talking about.
So when I was preparing to write my sci-fi series, one of the things that I did is I had to come up with some basic understanding and research about how fast can we currently travel in space. I mean, how fast can you go to the moon? And how fast can you go from point A to point B? And without that, it's easy to make some really big mistakes in your writing, and then it doesn't make sense. And if you get somebody that's a little bit analytical, they're going to read that like Angie just told you, and they're going to disengage from your story. But on the other side of that, I got so into doing research that the next thing I know, it's days later and I'm still watching YouTube videos about Elon Musk and rockets and how fast they go and all this stuff. So you've got to have a balance there to make sure that the story is believable and really good when you're dealing with fiction. Because remember, fiction is a tricky animal. With fiction, you want it to be almost believable. That really draws people in. So do a little bit of research when you need to, but don't get stuck there.
Now, the seventh mistake is tenses. Now, I learned about this in English. You probably did too. And you can get really into this, and this can be very complex, but I'm going to simplify it.
Hey, that's good. We like simple, because if you overcomplicate it, then we're doing too much research again, right?
This is true. But just, you can learn more about this if you want. But basic is that you use tenses to convey different meanings and to express a sense of time in what you're writing. And so the three basic tenses that most people can relate to is past, present, and future. So in a past, you would write about something that obviously has already happened.
For example, she jumped on the trampoline. It's past tense.
Yes, it already happened. It's past tense. But then you have present tense. And in present tense, you're writing about something that is currently happening right now. She is jumping on the trampoline right now. And that's present. And then there's future. And you can probably guess, in
she
future,
will jump on the trampoline. We got this. Yeah, this isn't that hard. You can do this.
So when we're talking about mistakes that new writers make with tenses, what happens is a lot of new writers will jump tenses. And they'll have one sentence that's in present tense, and then they write in past tense and future tense, and they hop all around in their tenses. And
it's kind of like head hopping, except
with
tenses. You get too many tenses going, you mix them up, they're not consistent. Yeah. And
so whatever you choose to write in, you want to be consistent with present, past, future. What's the time frame of this happening, and stick with it.
Now, the sixth mistake that new writers make is when we follow these writing rules a little too closely. It's really, really easy to make the rules the law. Like, this is the way it is, absolutely 100%. And while the writing rules are guidelines, they are just general guidelines. And we have to be careful that we don't follow them so rigidly that we lose our creativity, because every writer is a little bit different. So, like Angie and I are a writing team. We do write stuff individually, we write stuff together, and that's always a challenge because one of her writing rules that she's really a stickler on may not be one of my writing rules. And so we have to learn to work together like that as an author team. And you're going to have to learn which rules do you really need to watch, maybe because you make mistakes there, or which ones you can violate and break, or maybe just bend a little bit in your creative style.
So then why do they call them rules? And this is why. Because these writing guidelines, as we say, these writing guidelines help us improve our craft, be better writers. But it doesn't mean that all of this structure of writing and all of this stuff to learn about writing it doesn't have to be a straitjacket. Take all of the writing rules and guidelines and use them to help you be a better writer.
Angie, you don't really have to ask them to like and subscribe and to click that bell notification.
But I like to.
But you don't have to, because if they do like the video, they're going to do that, right? If you like it, you'll do all the stuff. We don't have to do that every time.
Well, okay, I will give you that. Now, we're going to move on.
Now that we got that out of the way, what is number 5? Let's move on.
Number 5 is starting and ending. Starting too soon, starting too late. And the same thing with ending too soon or ending too late. Where you start and stop your story is really important. And one of the things that this is really a factor in is pacing. What is the pacing in your story?
Like this video. Is it too slow? Is it too fast? Did we do too many topics? Maybe we should have done 5. Maybe we should have done 20.
Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
It's all about pacing, right?
So it really is all about pacing. And so one of the things you can do to figure out where to start and where to stop is to study story structure. The 3-act story structure, the hero's journey, Save the Cat. I mean, there's lots of different story structures, and that can help you figure out where your story should start. We've got videos on some of those, and I'll put the link in the description so you can check those out. But this is really important to understand, because if you start your story at the wrong point, perhaps you decide to start your story and you've got all this fluffy backstory stuff and there's nothing exciting happening to hook the reader and get them to keep reading, you've started at the wrong place. And likewise at the end, if you spend all this time perfecting the beginning, you've hooked them, you've got this story, it's going, it's got good conflict, and the middle's good, and then you just rush through the end and your ending doesn't nail it, you can also ruin your story that way.
So one of the interesting things in this particular topic of starting and stopping too early or too late or all of that is that this is true whether it's the first sentence, first paragraph, first page, if it's the hook, if it's the inciting incident, which act am I in? Every stage of the writing process, this comes into play. Are we starting and stopping too early or too late? Not understanding show, don't tell is the 4th mistake in our list of 10 as we work our way down to the number 1 mistake. You got to stay for that. But number 4 is not understanding show, don't tell, which means that sometimes people just try to tell everything. And if you're just doing an information dump, whether it's about the character or the world or whatever, that's a mistake. You want to show, not just tell. But on the other side of that equation, sometimes we forget that there needs to be some telling. And there's a right time to do that and a right amount to do that, because you can't show everything. There's a balance between show, don't tell. So while the majority should be showing, there's still a place for narrative and information giving. It's about how you weave that in. You want to weave that in little by little in your dialogue and your information so that it's not just a dump truck dumping information on the reader.
And a lot of new writers try to do that, the information dump. And then a lot of new writers, they just struggle with this concept of show, don't tell. When do I show? When do I tell? Well, can I tell? And this is really something I encourage new writers and even seasoned writers to just learn about the concept of showing and not telling, and when to use show and when to use telling, because you do have to have both in a book.
It takes a lot of practice to really master this, to get good at it. And, personally, it's easy for me to think, oh, but I really need the reader to know this so that they'll understand this. Yeah. And that's a mistake, because the reader is on a journey of discovery, and our showing gives them clues. So when it's done correctly, we're giving the information kind of in a hidden way, in a clue way, where they can discover it, and you don't have to tell them stuff for them to understand. Give the reader the credit. They really, if they are a reader, they like it, they think about it, they're going to catch on as the story develops.
And number 3 is trying to write for everyone. No matter what you're writing, you have an audience. And you want to start with the genre that you're going to write in and define your audience. Because if you want everyone to love what you've written, you are barking up the wrong tree.
Come on, everybody should love what I write.
Everybody's not going to love everything that you write.
Ouch, that hurts.
And an example of this is the book Intentional Motherhood. And this book is not for everybody. And that's okay. It's okay that it's not for everybody. When I started writing this, I defined my genre, I defined my audience, and I wrote to my audience. This is not written for millennials who do not have children. This is written for moms with children. That's my audience. I wrote the book for that audience. And so
now, here's a pro tip. I just want to jump in here because this is really important for new writers to understand. Understanding or defining your reader, your ideal reader, who is your niche, who is your audience. That is critical, not just in the writing process, but also in the marketing process down the road.
And the feedback process.
And in the feedback.
Yeah.
You've got to understand who you're writing to if you really want to be effective at writing and marketing and selling your book, getting your message out there.
And as we're talking about that, a lot of us get beta readers to read our work before we actually release it into the world. And you want to make sure that your beta readers are your audience. You do not want to get feedback from a beta reader who does not read your type of book. You want to make sure that you get beta readers in your audience.
That is a critical thing to remember, because if you're trying to write a sci-fi series like I'm doing, and you give it to somebody who doesn't like sci-fi, they're going to nitpick it in a way that a sci-fi reader, it wouldn't make sense. So that is a really good tip. The second, number 2, going right down the list here, number 2 mistake that we see a lot of new writers make is waiting for inspiration. And this is near and dear to my heart because I am an inspirational writer. I will be doing something, whether it's mowing the lawn or at work or eating dinner, and suddenly inspiration hits me and I have to write. I have to get it out. I love writing with inspiration. And a lot of people are like that. It just hits you and you're going to write. But the danger is that on the downside of that, if you don't have inspiration, you're not writing. And if you wait for inspiration to write all the time, you're never going to write, or randomly write, and it's not going to be cohesive. So this is what I recommend. You have to discipline yourself in the writing process and make yourself sit down and write. And as you do that, inspiration will come. But even if it doesn't, you still got to put in the time. So be consistent in your writing and balance that. Don't just wait for inspiration, or you're probably never going to write the entire story.
And the number one mistake is waiting for the perfect situation to write. We live in a very busy world where we have work schedules, we have so many distractions. We have TV, we have our phones, so many things that vie for our attention. And if we wait for the perfect situation to start writing and pursuing our dream of writing, it will never happen. And so we have to look in our lives, find those nooks and crannies. And even if that means you have 15 minutes, write for 15 minutes.
So if you're a busy mom, you may have to hide in the bedroom or in the bathroom and write some ideas down, take a notepad and jot some things down, because it's one of those tiny spaces that you have that you can write.
Yes.
Or if you're a guy and or a gal, either one, and you come home from work and you're tired, you turn on the TV for a minute and you watch an episode, it's okay. Just turn it off before the second episode and spend 15, 20 minutes writing. That consistency will help you achieve the writing goal way faster than waiting for the perfect time, vacation or holiday or whatever. It has to be a daily consistent thing.
If you find those little nooks and crannies, you may find that you have way more time to actually pursue your dream of writing a book than you realize. They say that 83% of the population want to write a book, but only 3% actually do it. That's not very many. So that's why I think this is the number one mistake that new writers make, is they stay in that place. If I don't have time, I don't have the energy, I can't do this, I'm too busy.
So look, we want you to be part of the number 3.
Yes.
The 3% that actually writes the book that's in you. Get it out. Now, if this video was helpful, then you might want to consider one of the other videos in this list that's going to pop up here. You might want to hit the playlist. Enjoy writing with us, because we want to help you achieve that. Now, let us know in the comments below if you're struggling with anything specific, and we will try to help you do that.
Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.